was 1 year ago today that Marilyn Mosby became Baltimore City State's attorney. It's been quite a year for the prosecutor. She sat down with our Brian Kubler to discuss the past year and to look forward.
Jamie, nothing will mark this prosecutor's year more than the charges she leveled against 6 Baltimore police officers in the death of Freddie Gray. But while Marilyn Mosby is still very much a wait-and-see mode on that case, she was about to what she views as her accomplishments in 2015 and her goals going forward. It was 1 year ago today that Marilyn Mosby was sworn in as the Baltimore City State's attorney. It so happens to be a year that has defined Baltimore City for better or worse.
It has been a very tumultuous year, but one in which it's a reflection of our city, very resilient. Despite the obstacles, we are still standing.
2015, of course, brought riots and unrest, followed quickly by the charges against 6 Baltimore police officers in the death of Freddie Gray. It was the moment that launched this relative unknown into the national spotlight. But as the unrest subsided, the violence surged, marking arguably Baltimore's deadliest year in recent history. It was a noticeable spike to physician-in-chief of shock trauma Dr. Thomas Scalea, one he thought related to the unrest, an assertion Marilyn Mosby disagreed with, as both were guests on ABC2's Square Off with Richard Scher back in September.
It seems temporally related to the riots, though.
I tend to disagree. I think that the violence was already going up. When you look at January, you know, it was already like 28 murders. And this was the month, how many snow days did we have in January? So I think that violence is cyclical.
Do you still feel that way?
So I'm not a criminologist. I can't tell you why crime takes place. But when you're talking about 24% of Baltimore's population living in poverty, 35% of children living in poverty, I think that you have to think that it has to do with socioeconomics.
An issue laid bare by the unrest resulting in a monthly homicide rate nearly doubling on average since the riots in April. Baltimore topped out at 344 murders. But despite the cause, the numbers are all the more reason, Mosby says, for her holistic approach to being a prosecutor. The state's attorney spoke about her job program for first-time nonviolent offenders, better funding witness protection programs by $250,000, better community engagement, and developing better cases against violent offenders. We were the only television news organization to see the vaunted war room this summer, where the feds and locals are working together to build better cases. And Marilyn Mosby says those cases are beginning to come in stronger.
Much stronger. Because what's happening now is that we're pulling our resources. We have the DEA, you have the FBI, we have, you know, BPD, we have the state police, we have the states, we have the U.S. attorneys, we have my prosecutors who are all brainstorming on how we can get these individuals that we've identified off our streets.
Still, the most notable moment came in May when Marilyn Mosby stood on the steps of the War Memorial Building and charged 6 Baltimore City police officers. William Porter's trial since resulted in a hung jury last month, and come Monday will be the jury selection for Officer Caesar Goodson. The state's attorney says despite the intense interest, she still cannot comment. This is a trial that the whole world is watching.
This case will be litigated in court. I can tell you that I cannot mention it. There's a gag order in place, and I have to respect the judge's order.
Now, we asked several questions about the trials, including her reaction to the hung jury last month. Each was met with that very last statement. Meanwhile, Mosby says she has a legislative agenda this year as well. In Annapolis, she will lobby for stricter sexual assault legislation and try to stiffen the penalties for second-degree murder from 30 years in prison to 40 years.